Hi, and welcome to My Words Our Journey, the podcast. This is episode 6 of Zodiac, Attempted Redemption. My name is Monty, and I'm your host and author. To recap episode 5, Michael discovers jogging helps with the rage, even if it is short-lived. He reflects on the killing of the Hendersons, pillars of the community, lives that had mattered, had made a difference. And he couldn't forget the 2 young kids. Clara gets a text from the Zodiac, who is now using disposable phones to communicate, to the journalist. Michael makes it clear he expects her to tell his story. How she chooses to do that is up to her, for now. This leads Shawn to suggest a crazy proposal, which leads the 2 inexperienced podcasters to glean some knowledge, spend some money, and start putting together their own podcast, where they hope to discuss the original Zodiac killer, his so-called relative revisiting the killings, and guests with insights, theories. We also learn Nikki and Michael have moved into a cottage. Another Nikki thing, but Michael doesn't care. He just wants her happy, which, at the moment, she is. She loves the cottage. The fact Michael is working, bringing home real money, so much so that he had bought her a car. What Nikki didn't know is Michael's mood swings. They were the product of killings and stealing. Finally, Michael goes on a hunt for 2 brothers, known to be traffickers. He waits until the time is right, and then saves one life and takes 2 others. The survivor, never the same, scarred for life. Today, we'll begin with chapter 33, entitled, It's Time. Shawn woke to the bed shifting beneath him. When he opened his eyes, Clara was bouncing on the mattress, wearing his sweatpants, his favorite pullover, and his old ball cap, her long brown hair pulled through the back. "Am I wearing your stuff today?" Shawn asked with a grin. Clara smirked mid-bounce. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No. Wear whatever you want." "Good," she said, handing him her phone, "because I think you're going to want to read this, and then I think you're going to want to get dressed." There, on Clara's phone, a new message. "This is the Zodiac. It's time. The decision is yours, but we both know a podcast would be a winner. There's an envelope, under the mat, behind your house. Everything you'll need for your first episode, I'd guess." Clara was right. Shawn was out of the bed in a couple seconds. 10 minutes later, they were on the road. 20-some minutes later, they stood in Clara's backyard. Shawn crouched and lifted up the mat, a manila envelope. He scanned the yard, instincts flaring. No doorbell cams, no motion lights. None of the neighbors seemed to have them either. Older neighborhood, retired residents, an HOA. Everyone felt safe, comfortable, the kind of place where no one would expect a serial killer to stroll through their backyards. If they only knew, Shawn thought, as he turned around to Claire. He froze. She was pale, still, her posture, her expression unreadable. Before he could ask, his phone rang. It was Kenny. He stepped aside to take the call. But by the time he hung up, Clara had already opened the envelope and laid the contents across the kitchen table. He joined her. They looked at notes, timelines, newspaper clippings, phrases that echoed earlier messages, a chilling amount of detail. It was everything they'd need to start a podcast, as promised. Shawn watched as Clara bounced around the kitchen, talking about episode structure, narrative, tone, how to blend facts with fear, like this was a story she'd been waiting for her whole life. She looked so confident, so sure, so unshakable. But she wasn't bulletproof. And this guy wasn't playing games. This wasn't just a podcast. He called Kenny back. Kenny agreed. Yeah, it could make a killer podcast, but it could also make a great Dateline episode, one where he and Clara were the victims. Shawn had thought about that too. There was something familiar in the Zodiac's tone, the arrogance, the invitation to play along, just like the first one, always performing for the press. When Clara emerged with a rolling suitcase, her smile wide, Shawn just stood there thinking, she has no idea. When they got back to the rental, Shawn set Clara down. They got Kenny on the phone. They stressed the danger, the unknowns. Clara listened, asked some smart questions, and in the end, she made her decision. Chapter 34. A Good Place. The air inside the dealership was thick. Michael could hardly stand it. Too many smiles. Too much chatter. Customers signing paperwork in cubicles. Others lounging on couches watching a cooking show while their vehicles were being serviced. It was all too much. He had been there 20 minutes. The HR director asked him to shadow someone named Andrew. She also mentioned Andrew went by the nickname Wrecker. Only Michael couldn't find him, and the salesmen weren't exactly helpful. They shrugged, acted like there was no record. He'd remember that. Eventually he found him, all 5'7", 150 pounds, receding hairline, a face that wore disappointment like a birthmark. Michael judged him on sight. He was only there because of Nikki. It had started 2 weeks prior. She'd begun talking about their future, careers, finances, adulting. Then came the college talk, degrees, what-ifs. When Michael made it clear he had no 5-year plan, no career path, Nikki switched gears. She didn't get mad. She got motivated. Mission mode. Fix this fast, or else. Michael didn't want to know what the what else was. They were in a good place. The money certainly wasn't going to run out anytime soon, but he couldn't exactly tell her that, could he? So, when she found him a great opportunity at a respectful local car dealership, he went along, which is how he ended up smoking outside the service bay, standing next to a man who insisted on being called Wrecker. 4.5 hours later, Michael felt like he had been through a master's class in dealership operations. Wrecker knew his stuff. Michael was impressed. He even felt a little guilty about writing him off at the beginning. By the end of the day, Michael was looking forward to the second. The following morning, they spent in the service drive, the front line, where customers arrived for appointments. It was high pressure, customer-facing, fast-paced. Wrecker was smooth, quick with the software. Michael found he was pretty good too. He could turn on the charm when he wanted to, and this mattered to Nikki, so it mattered to him. But that voice inside his head, it hadn't gone away. The voice would whisper about the job, about customers, co-workers. Not all of the customers were polite. Most were, but they would get some bad ones. The voice wanted to know where they lived. Michael pushed through it until after lunch, when he couldn't. A man and his teenage son pulled into the service lane. At first, everything was normal. Then the man asked how long the service would take. When the young lady at the desk told him it would take a couple hours, he started swearing, demanding a loaner vehicle. She apologized. There wasn't one available. More swearing, raised voice. Wrecker stepped in, normally able to handle the situation. He probably was going to offer the guy a vehicle to drive, but the man wouldn't have it. He turned on Wrecker, loud, cruel, abusive, called the dealership trash, threatened to call the owner, who he claimed he was a friend with. The son never looked up, just stared at his phone like this was routine. Ashamed, the voice whispered. At the very least, the father should be taught a lesson. Without thought of consequence, Michael stepped between Wrecker and the customer, looked him deep in the eye. Michael's voice was steady. I'll take you outside, and you can sit at the picnic tables until your vehicle is done. Sound good? The man stared, really looked, deep into his eyes. The man backed off. Good choice. At the end of the day, Michael sat outside the office in the back of the hallway. His phone buzzed with Nikki's messages. He ignored them. He had no good news. Didn't know if he still had a job. He was told to wait, so he waited. Wrecker and the young woman, they were inside with the boss. Michael sat. He thought about the voice, thought about the last few weeks. Turns out, the voice said, easier to knock off drug dealers, steal their money, lie to your girlfriend. Michael exhaled. The voice wasn't wrong. Chapter 35. The first episode was done. Shawn thought the finished product was good. Not just good for beginners. Good. Getting there, though? That was another story. The pair had worked on 2 segments before they realized they hadn't hit the record button. They'd erased at one point, and then a coffee spill nearly took out the laptop. 3 times they paused, separated for a few minutes, unsure if they'd be able to finish it all. By the end of the day, they did. It took 6 hours, but they produced a 1 hour and 28-minute episode. A podcast, Zodiac, Attempted Redemption. With the help of Clara's network and the public's endless appetite for the Zodiac content, it launched with traction. It was exciting. It was real. They had 4 days before Kenny's flight would arrive. At least another week before Leonard would drive in. He didn't like to fly anymore. Clara was looking forward to Shawn's friends. Shawn? He was ready to have backup. Clara found herself checking the listener count 5 times that morning. She smiled, just to herself. She spent her whole career chasing someone else's truth. Now the truth had her name on it. Nikki rounded the back of the car and gave Michael that look. The one that said, "We had the talk. Please don't screw this up." They had talked multiple times over the last 10 hours, ever since she picked him up, ever since he had told her exactly what happened and how the manager had thanked him for standing up for his coworkers. She knew what Michael could be like. So did he, but he was trying. Today his spirits were high. He'd gone for a run that morning and listened to a new podcast. It was well done, smart, oddly familiar. Clara's voice, that detective. The title didn't sit right with him, though. Attempted Redemption. Attempted? Like he hadn't done the work? Like he hadn't tried? Like Clara had already decided how the story ends? It felt unfair, dismissive, final. Still, maybe it fit. Time would tell. Today, he and Wrecker were on the sales floor. They went to the morning sales meeting, walked the lot. He learned the pitch. Turns out, it wasn't his favorite environment, but it was fine. Nikki was working tonight. He'd lift later. The detached garage at the cottage made for a decent home gym. Wrecker took his time, answered every question, showed him every angle. He didn't brag. Michael offered to buy lunch. Wrecker raised an eyebrow. "You buying? Don't threaten me for a good time." Afterwards, they covered loaners, tags, gas cards, new inventory, trade-ins. A lot of moving parts. Wrecker had been there 8 years. He had seen it all. Michael found himself listening to everything Wrecker said. By the end of the day, the GM, Derek Spencer, was approaching. He asked if he had run 2 brand new Corvettes across town. They needed to have their protective coating applied. Michael caught the look from the other sales guys. Flickers of resentment. Little, but visible. But Wrecker, he was thrilled. Michael, the same. Even if it was just 10 minutes, it was the coolest thing he had done in a long time. Maybe ever. He clocked out later that day as usual. As he walked down the hall, Mr. Spencer approached. Casual, friendly. He went out of his way to stop Michael. "How'd you like the drive?" he asked. Michael couldn't stop smiling. "Loved it. Seriously, thank you, sir. Really appreciate it." He'd said it 3 times, maybe 4. Spencer chuckled. "There'll be more chances," he said. "You're doing good, Michael. Keep it up." He clapped him on the shoulder and walked on. Michael watched him go. Boss or no boss, the guy was all right in his book. And for the first time in a while, things felt like they might actually work out. That thought lingered too long. Things don't fall into place like this. Not for him. Not without a cost. Chapter 36. Redemption. The first episode of the podcast was a success. Not because of its title. Not because of the recent killings. It worked because Clara and Shawn had earned it. Podcasting didn't reward hype alone. Headlines helped, sure. But they weren't enough. It demanded something more. Engagement. Perspective. Voice. If your content didn't say something, it disappeared. Clara and Shawn had something to say. They gave insight. They offered first-hand accounts, her communications with the killer, his analysis of the writings. And more than anything, they sounded like they were invested and meant every word they said. Clara had opened the episode with a plea. She asked the killer to turn himself in, to get help, to save himself and his family from more grief. It came from the heart, and it landed. Shawn followed with a brief history of the original Zodiac, not a deep dive, just enough to reset the table. Most people knew the broad strokes, but the reminder grounded the listener. It set the tone. Then came the facts, back and forth. Their cadence was easy, natural. The listeners, they had heard what Shawn already knew. Clara and himself worked good together. There was chemistry. Not just romantic, even though that was there. They were a team. The heart of the episode was in its name, attempted redemption. The killer had made it clear. Moving forward, he was only going to kill those he believed were guilty of crimes against the community. A vigilante? A legacy haunted by blood? Was it redemption? Revenge? Replication? Shawn had brought in a professor from Berkeley, someone willing to speak on the philosophy of penance. Personal, cultural, generational. Clara had contacted a retired Chronicle colleague, once considered the paper's expert on the original Zodiac. Both segments added depth, credibility, weight. Special care was given to the victims. Clara and Shawn had agreed from the beginning they would not pass judgment. They weren't the courts. They weren't God. Whatever the killer believed, every victim deserved dignity. Each was a child of God, each taken by someone many would say was possessed by the devil. The tone was relevant, grounded. Not excusing, not exploiting, just human. It ran for 1 hour and 28 minutes. By nightfall, the comments were pouring in. Most were thoughtful, curious, grateful. But some were not. Some accused them of cashing in, of turning tragedy into content, of building a platform on someone else's pain. Opportunist, one wrote. 2 more voices pretending to care while chasing clicks. Clara did not respond to that one. She just closed her computer and walked away. Later that night, she and Shawn sat in silence and listened to the episode again. At first, they were surprised, then nervous. How do we top that? She asked. Her voice was quiet, less certain than usual. Shawn didn't have an answer, and for the first time, he wasn't sure she was proud of what they had made. But they both knew they had to try. Chapter 37. No time for faith. Kenny would never get used to airports, the hustle, the crowd control chaos, the urgent need to hurry up and then wait. He'd also never quite shaken his fear of heights. But he was certainly not going to spend 2 days, 3, on the road, not in a car, on a train, or a bus, when a plane could get you there in a few hours. Clara and Shawn were at a high top, near the bar, when he arrived. Drinks poured, nachos just arriving. It felt like old friends reuniting. It was comforting, natural. Kenny had listened to the podcast on the flight. He told them he liked it. The pacing, the tone, the balance between fact and feeling. That they were visibly pleased made him happy. It did his heart good to see Shawn enjoying life again. Over margaritas, Shawn and Kenny told Clara how they first met, stories she had already half heard from her deep dive into the Defender of Children case. But hearing it from them, the tension, the details, the humor in the hindsight, brought the connection to life. Then, to Shawn's surprise, Faith appeared. Smiles wide, short skirt, high energy. "Well, fancy meeting you three here," she said, sliding up to the table. "I listened to the podcast today. So good." She moved quickly, straight to Kenny. "And are you the Kenny Costco that I've heard so much about?" Before Shawn could step in, his phone rang. It was the detective assigned to the Zodiac case. They had already dropped off copies of their material, letters, audio, timelines, everything, along with a heads up about the podcast and their intentions, what they'd cover, what they wouldn't, and how they viewed the department's performance so far. The call confirmed a meeting with the higher-ups, 9 o'clock the following morning. That was where their focus needed to be. So, when he hung up, Shawn turned back to the table, politely excused the group, paid the tab, and guided Clara and Kenny out. Faith was left standing there, smile gone, mouth slightly open. Kenny chuckled once they were outside. She must know one of the bartenders. At least one, Clara laughed. No way she just happened to be here. As they exited into the night, Faith just stood still. Her drink untouched, gaze fixed on the door that the trio had just walked through. Just a quiet recognition that whatever she thought she might be part of, she wasn't. On the drive back to the Airbnb, Shawn filled them in on the morning meeting. "You think they're trying to shut us down?" Clara asked. "They might try," Shawn said, "but they're too late." Clara stared out the window, chewing her bottom lip. Still, if this gets bigger, if he escalates. That's why we're going to the meeting, being transparent. It's the only play that keeps us safe. Shawn was confident, but not careless. They all thought, tomorrow could change everything. Then Leonard called. The mood in the car lightened, as Leonard said himself and Sticks were a few days out, sleeping in the back of his truck at rest stops, Walmart parking lots, old school road trip. "Trip's been great so far," Leonard said. "Weather's good. Traffic's light. Just enjoying the open road and the beautiful landscape God created." Shawn smiled at the sound of his voice. Chapter 38. Marcy. The news article laid it all out, plainly. If the charges were true, Marcy Ann Marie Johnson wasn't just a bad person. She was a contender for the worst mother in the recorded history. 3 children, ages 3 to 7, left alone for weeks while she and her boyfriend took cross-country road trips. Little food, sometimes no power, no running water, black mold, rodents, lice. She'd told her children not to leave the apartment, that monsters would get them if they tried. So, 3 terrified children sat alone, crying, waiting, until their mother came crashing in like thunderstorm and disappeared again just the same. She was out now, technically. There was a technicality found by her lawyer. The article mentioned she wasn't allowed to leave the county and she was staying with her aunt, May. Thanks for that, Michael thought. In the court of public opinion, Marcy was already convicted. She knew it. Her aunt knew it too. But May had been close with Marcy's mother. Blood trumpeted logic. She wouldn't leave her only niece out on the street. Even if she was guilty. Which she was. Some people didn't deserve a second chance. That's why he existed. The house is set on a double lot just outside the edge of the party district, surrounded by a low, black iron fence, installed sometime in the 70s. More symbolic than secure. Micah had watched the house twice that week, Tuesday and Friday. On those nights, he told Nikki he was working late, doing inventory in the parts department. Marcy smoked outside. Her aunt insisted. She usually had her last cigarette break around 11 p.m. Michael had arranged a spa weekend for Nikki and her mother. They wouldn't be home till late afternoon tomorrow. It was raining, not ideal, but he'd make the most of it. He crouched low behind the large swing, hidden from view. A ridiculous amount of personal information had been available online. Marcy was careless, and her aunt, she'd had her use Buick Regal serviced at the dealership. Too easy. The screen door creaked open. Marcy stepped out, drink in one hand, pack of smokes, lighter, and what looked like a cell phone in the other. Lighting was poor. Her aunt usually watched TV in the front room. No visitors had come during previous stakeouts. Marcy was a big woman. When she flopped onto the porch swing, sending it rocking backwards, the wooden slats pounded on Michael's chest, harder than he expected. The impact knocked the breath out of him. His grunt was masked by thunder. The rain thickened. Michael adjusted, studied himself. Then, through the wooden slats of the swing, he struck. The knife slid in, warm, quiet. He withdrew, moved up 2 slats, drove the blade again. She tried to scream, but it came out gurgling. The rain on metal drowned the rest. Her body slumped forward. He didn't need to see the pool of blood spreading beneath her to know she was dead. He could feel it. The plan was simple. Jump back over the fence, walk to the car, order a pizza, head home, maybe a workout, long shower. It all still sounded great. But first, Michael opened the screen door. Chapter 39. It just felt right. Forensic Files was playing on an old floor model television, late 70s, maybe early 80s. The living room itself was cluttered. 2 recliners, the TV, and a wooden cabinet filled with keepsakes Auntie had collected over her lifetime. Nothing of value, but to her, it was everything. Auntie was asleep in one of the recliners, her head tilted, mouth slightly open. Michael had helped himself to a beer and eased into the other chair. No reason, it just felt right. The voice? Didn't suggest it. He made the decision on his own. The recliner? It looked comfortable. The beer? It was cold. The episode? Looked new. So, why not? 1 episode turned into 3. 4 beers turned into a few shots from her liquor cabinet. He wandered through the house, took a little cash, a few nice pieces of jewelry. Now he wasn't just a murderer. He was a thief, too. At 2:30 a.m., he was ready to leave. Rain still pelted the windows, heavy, consistent, perfect. He walked to the front door, keys in hand. Then he paused, turned halfway back, stopped, then walked to the old woman. She had never stirred. On the side table, near her chair, were her glasses, a remote, and a neat stack of letters. He hadn't noticed them before. Wished he still hadn't. But he had, and now he was standing in front of her, deciding. He listened to the rain for a long time. For a beat, he waited. For her to wake up. For a word, sound, a reason to stop. But nothing came. Then, 1 quick shot to the head. Quick, clean. He made his exit. He told himself Auntie was better off. The cancer was too far along. The insurance payments, months behind. The house would sell to cover unpaid taxes. There was nowhere for her to go. Her final days would have been agony. Now, she wouldn't have to deal with it, Michael thought. The meeting began promptly at 9 a.m. No waiting this time. Clara, Shawn, and Kenny sat on one side of the table. Facing them were a dozen representatives, local detectives, FBI agents, members of a task force. Introductions were made. Clara answered their questions clearly. She told them what she had already told Shawn and Kenny earlier. She had no idea who the Zodiac was. She didn't know how he got her name, her address, her number. She didn't know why it was her. The questions came rapid fire, but Clara was ready. She'd had practice. Shawn and Kenny watched carefully. The officials nodded, occasionally scribbled notes. They'd done their homework, not just on Clara, but on Shawn, Kenny, and Leonard. Someone implied they'd listened to the podcast. Others nodded. Then, just as the meeting was winding down, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and froze. The subject line chilled her more than the words ever could. This is the Zodiac speaking. Chapter 40. An Eye for an Eye. Michael and Nikki had the day off. They walked hand in hand around the small fenced-in dog yard, watching the third rescue pup they'd visited. His name was Buddy, a wiry little thing with expressive eyes and an odd gait. The staff had told her his story. He was a survivor. Michael found himself rooting for the dog, but he kept that to himself. This was Nikki's thing. She lifted Buddy into her arms and smiled. I think he's the one. What do you think? Michael laughed. For a moment, he let himself picture it. This life, this family, this dog. Good practice for a baby, he joked. The voice in his head laughed louder. A dog is the best you're ever going to get. You won't live long enough to see a baby. 2 hours later, they were back at the cottage with a new dog bed, food, treats, toys, a car seat, a blanket, 2 leashes, and a personalized water bowl. This is the Zodiac. This was not the voice. This was all me. Blood of the Zodiac running through my veins. Don't spend 1 second feeling sorry for her. She was guilty. Feel sorry for the system that failed the aunt and those children. A system that feels no heat for its blind eye. But what if? Lowercase z. Shawn read the message 3 times. Kenny 4. The system, blind eye. But what if? Kenny muttered. Literal? A threat? A challenge? Then he asked, to no one in particular, who was the judge in Marcy Johnson's case? A runner returned within minutes. Judge Clinton Westfield. 37 years on the bench. Married for 42. 5 children, 12 grandchildren. Tough but fair. A no-nonsense presence in the courthouse. Old school, reliable, unbending. The room agreed the message could be a direct threat. They needed eyes on the judge, now. Michael had beat them to it. The judge had just finished a game of pickleball with 2 other men. Buddy was at Nikki's workplace, being introduced as their newest family member, scheduled for microchipping later that afternoon. Michael's excuse was simple. He needed to stop by work, finish a trading video. Nikki didn't ask questions. He timed it perfectly. The judge packed up, said his goodbyes, and walked to his SUV, parked in the closest handicap space. Michael jogged casually, slowed near the SUV, then sped up at just the right angle. A bump, a slip, an accident. The judge hit the pavement hard, and then 2 quick slashes to the face. Not deep, not fatal, but enough. Message sent. Michael kept his hood on, straightened up, pulled his headphones over his ears, and jogged on. He didn't look back. Too many people, but no one close enough to really see. The layout of the courtyard and the parking, a wide V-shape, oak tree in the center, gave him the coverage he needed. Adrenaline surged. A few minutes later, he was sweating. He removed the hoodie, switched to earbuds, stripped down to his bare chest and cheap running shoes. Unrecognizable now. Just another guy enjoying the day. There were families nearby, a couple with a stroller, a pair of men holding hands. The world spun on. Michael had circled back. They were removing the body. Police, CSI. He saw her and the detective. And now a third man with them. Someone new. He knew it was time to go. But he couldn't. Even when he saw those people with cameras capturing crowd shots, even then he stayed. Time to leave, the voice wasn't asking. Michael jogged toward a bike he had stashed nearby. Bent to grab the duffel bag and froze. His name? Someone was calling his name? Again, he ignored the voice. Then again. Muffler? That voice? That nickname? Michael's stomach twisted. It was Muffler, a coworker. The kind who talked too much, remembered too much. Bad, very bad. Michael mounted the bike and rode off in the opposite direction. Within the hour, he and Nikki were at Smitty's, eating wings, shooting pool, and showing off Buddy. He made sure they took pictures, made sure they were posted. He just wished he could have changed the timestamp. Under duress, it was the best he could do. And I think this would be a good place to stop today's episode. I really appreciate everyone that's listening to Zodiac, Attempted Redemption.